Welcome to the laws of cooking on Shabbat. This will be part 37 of the class. We are working from a sefer called Halacha Birura by Rav David Yosef Shlita. We're going to see different halachot today, but what we're going to begin speaking about today is benefiting from halacha done on Shabbat for after Shabbat, which is a Yom Tov. Before we begin today's class, let me just show you this chart that we have over here. You see right over here, Rabotai, Friday night is Shabbat. Saturday is Shabbat. However, Saturday night is Yom Tov into Sunday. So this is what we're going to see, B'ezrat Hashem, which is Yom Tov Rishon, which is the first day of Yom Tov, right over here. Now, what we're going to start dealing with today is what happens if a person did a malacha on Shabbat itself for after Shabbat, but after Shabbat was the Yom Tov. Now, since we live outside of the land of Israel, which is called Chutz La'aretz, we have, Rabotai, 2 days of Yom Tov, where it's from Sunday to Monday. Now, to better explain what is going on over here, we have to remember, the Torah states, Vahi erev vahi boker yom echad. It was evening and it was day and it was day one. It comes to teach us that our day starts at night. So therefore, Rabotai, from Friday night to Saturday until basically when the 3 stars come out is Shabbat. But from Saturday night into Sunday until the 3 stars come out is Yom Tov Rishon, the first day of Yom Tov. From Sunday night until Monday when the stars come out is Yom Tov Sheni, the second day of Yom Tov. So B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to start seeing today that what happens if a person went ahead and he cooked on Shabbat for after Shabbat, and after Shabbat ended up being a Yom Tov. When are you going to be allowed to eat that food? Okay, so let's just see right over here. This represents the case in Chutz La'aretz when Friday, which is a regular weekday, however, Friday night is Shabbat. Saturday, Rabotai, is Shabbat. Plus, after Shabbat comes out, first day of Yom Tov goes into Sunday. Sunday night goes into Monday, which is the second day of Yom Tov. Okay, so now we're going to begin today's class. The first topic Rav David Yosef Shlita is going to open up with Achilat Ma'aseh Shabbat B'Yom Tov She'achar HaShabbat. Eating food which was prepared on Shabbat in a forbidden way, eating it on Yom Tov, which is after Shabbat. Im Chal Yom Tov B'Motzei Shabbat, if Yom Tov fell out after Shabbat, Ubishel o Afa B'Shabbat, and you cooked or you baked on Shabbat itself, Ben b'shoigig u ben b'meisid, whether you did it by accident, whether you did it intentionally, says Rav David Yosef Rabotai, Asur lechol et otot avshil b'yom tov. It is forbidden for you to eat that food or that baked product that you baked on Shabbat on Yom Tov. Why? There is a rule which states that you are not allowed to prepare from Shabbat to Yom Tov. It's called hachana, preparation. You're not allowed to prepare from Shabbat to Yom Tov. So therefore, if a person went ahead and he cooked on Shabbat or he baked on Shabbat, I don't care if he did it by accident or if he did it intentional, doesn't matter. It is forbidden for him to eat the food after Shabbat when it is a Yom Tov. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita with the next halacha. V'yesh omrim, and there are those that say, Sha'afilu im b'shal b'Shabbat beheter, even if you cooked food on Shabbat in a permissible way. How can a person cook food on Shabbat in a permissible way? Very simple. לצורך חולה שיש בו סכנה. If you chas v'sham lo oleinu rabotai have a sick person in the household that his life is in danger, you are allowed to cook for them on Shabbat. So says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if a person went ahead and he cooked food on Shabbat in a permissible way for a sick person that his life is in danger, where we're going to tell you she'asur lebari lechol memenu b'Shabbat, where we're going to tell you that a healthy person is not allowed to eat from that food on Shabbat, so too we're going to tell you asur ototavshil lebari b'yom tov shechal b'motzi Shabbat, that food is also going to be prohibited to a healthy person on Yom Tov, which fell out to be after Shabbat. So according to these Yesh Omrim, according to these opinions, even if a person cooked food in a permissible way for a person who is sick and his life is in danger, you would have thought there's no problem. Says Rav David Yosef, two problems, Rabotai. Number one, a healthy person cannot eat that food on Shabbat itself. Number two, a healthy person can't even eat it after Shabbat, when after Shabbat is a Yom Tov. Nevertheless, he says, V'yesh materim. There are those that will allow you to eat it. V'yesh l'smok al devrehem lakel, and you are able to rely on their words to be lenient. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if a person cooked food on Shabbat in a permissible way, for example, for a sick person where his life is in danger, where we stated that a healthy person is not allowed to eat food on Shabbat, that Rabotai, everybody agrees. However, after Shabbat, yesh machmirim, there are stringent opinions that are going to tell you even a healthy person shouldn't eat it. However, yesh matirim, however, you do have opinions that will allow you to eat this food after Shabbat, even though it's a Yom Tov. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita, and he says, Umikol makom, and nevertheless, im haya davar bechutz la'aretz. Here we go, Rabotai. A lot of people, Baruch Hashem, live outside of the land of Israel. So he says, Umikol makom, nevertheless, im haya davar bechutz la'aretz. If this thing happened outside of the land of Israel, v'chal Yom Tov b'yom Rishon u'b'yom Sheni, Yom Tov fell out after Shabbat on the first day, which is a Sunday, and on the second day, which is a Monday. Ubishel b'Shabbat l'tzorich Yom Tov. Now a person cooked on Shabbat for the sake of Yom Tov. Mutar lechol et oto tavshil b'yom Sheni. You are allowed to eat that food on the second day of Yom Tov, which is a Monday. Shuhu Yom Tov Sheni shel Galiyot, which is the second day of Yom Tov of the exile. So let me show you right over here. Let's go back over here for 1 second. If a person went ahead and he cooked food on Shabbat, right here, Rabotai, he cooked food on Shabbat for after Shabbat, but it comes out that it's Yom Tov of day number 1, and also you have Yom Tov of day number 2, since we are outside of the land of Israel. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, on Yom Tov of day number 1, it is forbidden for you to eat that food. Nevertheless, for Yom Tov of day number 2, you would be allowed to eat the food that you had cooked on Shabbat. So let's go back, Rabotai, to where we left off. Umikol makom, and nevertheless, im hayah davar bechutz la'aretz, if this thing happened outside of the land of Israel, where it's 2 days Yom Tov, v'chal Yom Tov b'yom Rishon u'b'yom Sheni, and Yom Tov fell out to be on Sunday and on Monday, like explained, u'bishel b'Shabbat l'tzorich Yom Tov, and you cooked on Shabbat for the sake of Yom Tov, mutar lechol et oto tavshil b'yom Sheni shu Yom Tov Sheni shel Galiyot. You are allowed to eat that food which was cooked on Shabbat on the second day, which is a Monday, which is going to be the second day of exile, meaning the second day of Yom Tov. Now, why is that, Rabotai? We need to understand Because the second day of Yom Tov, it's a doubt. Was it really a Yom Tov or not? So since you have a doubt, we're going to be lenient. The first day of Yom Tov, 100% it's Yom Tov. But the second day of Yom Tov, Rabotai, it's only a stringency from the Chachamim, which we have to keep. But nevertheless, it's added because of a doubt. Still, we're going to tell you that everybody has to keep the second day of Yom Tov. But nevertheless, when it comes to this halakha, you're going to be able to be lenient and eat the food which was cooked on Shabbat in a prohibited way, and you're going to be able to eat it on the second day of Yom Tov, which is going to be on a Monday or even a Sunday night, because that's where the second day of Yom Tov begins. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita with another halakha. V'im bishel b'Shabbat mayim v'nistanenu. Rabotai, another case Rav David Yosef Shlita brings. What happens if a person went ahead and he boiled water on Shabbat, and now that water cooled down? Says Rav David Yosef, mutar lishtotam, it's permissible for you to drink them, b'mo'otzei Shabbat, after Shabbat, shuhu Yom Tov, which is going to be a Yom Tov. Umikol makom, and nevertheless, im ein otam maim ru'uyim l'shtiya, if that water is not fit for drinking purposes, below bishul, without first boiling it. Now, Rabotai, we have to understand, I don't know how many of you guys have filters in the house, but when you have a filter, the water is filtered. So therefore you go ahead and you drink it right away. But if you remember, Rabotai, the days when we had no filters, how do you get rid of, everything inside the water? You boil it to kill the germs or anything else. Because remember, it comes from under the pipes, under the ground. So you boil it in order to be able to purify the water. So says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if that water is not drinkable without you first boiling it, then over there the halakha is going to be different. So let's see that inside. Nevertheless, if that water is not drinkable without you first boiling it, and so too, and so too, if a person went ahead and he cooked on Shabbat fruits, you're able to eat them raw. For example, apple. Now they improved because of you cooking them. Like, for example, Rabotai, you went and you made compote. Very good example, Rabotai. You went and you made compote. Now, that apple of the compote, can you eat it? Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, Yesh lahachmir shelo leochlam biyom tov she'achra Shabbat. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, one should be stringent not to eat them on Yom Tov after Shabbat. Now again, that's only for the first day of Yom Tov, but on the second day of Yom Tov, you're going to be able to go ahead and be lenient. So let's just see this halakha outside for a second. If a person went ahead and he boiled water on Shabbat, said Rav David Yosef Shlita, that immediately b'mochi Shabbat, you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to drink them. Even though mochi Shabbat is Yom Tov. No problem. However, Rabotai, if that water is not drinkable without you first boiling it, then Rav David Yosef Shlita said, it's good to be stringent, not to consume that water on the first day of Yom Tov, but consume it on the second day of Yom Tov. And so too with fruits, if a person went ahead and he cooked the fruits where it improved their taste, like for example compote, you put apples or peaches and grapes. Now Rabotai, you were not allowed to do it on Shabbat, but you did it. We're going to tell you over there also, don't eat them on the first day of Yom Tov after Shabbat. Be stringent, but on the second day of Yom Tov, you can go ahead and you can eat the fruits which were cooked on Shabbat. Okay, Rabotai, with that, we do conclude that whole business of Shabbat and going into Yom Tov. Now we're going to speak about Kedera Shebishlu B'Shabbat. What do you do with the pot that you went ahead and you used it on Shabbat to cook food inside it? Or what do you do with an urn Or those teapots that you put on the oven. Let's say, Rabotai, unfortunately, maybe, the parents or the grandparents or relatives, they're not Shomer Torah mitzvot. Now, you want to come to their house and you want to eat after Shabbat. But on Shabbat, Rabotai, they use their pots, they cook, they use their teapots, they put on the fire to make water. Are you allowed to go ahead and benefit from those pots and pans and teapots and so on and so forth? Anything which was used on Shabbat to cook in a prohibited way. So that's what we're going to speak about today. If you had a pot where they cooked with it on Shabbat, what are the halachot? Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, now we're going to see that there's a very big difference if they did it by accident. A lot of our parents, a lot of people today that desecrate Shabbat, Rabotai, 99.99999%, it's an accident. They don't really know the halachot. Believe me, Rabotai, there's a lot of things you have to know. If you would explain it to them, the severity of it, and much more, Rabotai, when people become educated, people stop. So, Rabotai, a lot of people, when they desecrate Shabbat, it's only because out of ignorance and not chas v'shalom, Rabotai, to dafka, to in spite to go against Hashem. People don't do it for that. When you start explaining to them the importance of Shabbat, the punishment if you don't keep Shabbat, and so on and so forth, Rabotai, people start, you see that parents where at one point they never kept Shabbat, now that they become older and older, their children start keeping Shabbat, they also start keeping Shabbat. Yeah, people change, Rabotai. Don't push people away. Bring people back. So it says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if you had a pot where they cooked with it on Shabbat by accident, here we go. Is that pot allowed to be used throughout the weekday? Can you cook in it another food? Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, Mutar lishtamesh be'ota kedera achar Shabbat. You are allowed to use that pot after Shabbat, or that teapot, or that pan, doesn't matter what it's going to be. Whatever you used on Shabbat to cook food with, or to boil water with, even though Rabotai, you're not allowed to do it, but if you did it by accident, we're going to tell you that that pot, or that pan, or that teapot is allowed to be used after Shabbat. You're allowed to go ahead and cook and do whatever you want with it. Ve'en tzarich lahagila. You do not need to do hagala. You do not need to prepare a pot of boiling hot water and then dip the dish inside there. That you don't have to do, Rabotai. Va'afilu lechatchilan, and even ideally you don't have to do hagala. Hagala, Rabotai, when I say hagala, just have that terminology in mind. Hagala literally means, Rabotai, when you prepare a pot of hot water, you really get it to its boiling point. Make sure you wash the dishes or the pots or the pans. You have to wash them very well. And then, Rabotai, you have to dip that into the boiling hot water. Let it sit there a little bit, just, move it around. Then you take it out and then you run it under cold water. That is the process of Hagalah. So says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if a person used a pot on Shabbat to cook something in it by accident, no problem. You are allowed to use that pot after Shabbat to cook food with it, and you do not need to do Hagala even initially. 100% kosher pot. So therefore, Rabotai, if you have children or married children, Baruch Hashem, that are no longer living with you in the house, or even children that are living with you in the house, but they're more observant than you are, they have to know that when the mother cooks food for them later on, in that pot that she used on Shabbat, they are allowed to go ahead and eat the food from that pot. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita to speak about what happens if it was done intentionally. Now, Rabotai, I have to be clear when I say this. Do you know what means b'meisid? Number one, we have to warn him that he's not allowed to do it. Number two, he has to know the halachot of Shabbat. Cold. the punishments of Shabbat. So, Rabotai, to tell me that a person goes ahead and he desecrates Shabbat knowingly or intentionally is very hard, because there are many, many halachot you have to know. So therefore, Rabotai, let's say you had a person that he knew today is Shabbat, and he knew that this malakah is not, he learned the halachot well. He knows the punishments to it. Still, he went ahead and he did it. Let's say at one point he was religious, or she was religious, she went to Beis Yaakov school, and now something happened, now she's against Hashem, whatever it might be, Rabotai. Or like you see today, a lot of girls that went to, Beis Yaakov, or the Shavach Yeshiva. Unfortunately, Rabotai, a lot of them, well, I don't want to say a lot of them, but unfortunately, you have many girls that when they get married, they don't get married really to Talmidei Chachamim. Today it's not about getting married to a Talmid Chacham. Today it's about getting married to who has money. What does he do? What's his profession? What kind of car he drives? What kind of house he has? That's a problem, Rabotai. And I've seen many girls, Rabotai, where by choosing the wrong husband, their lives went like this, like literally a U-turn back the other way. What their parents invested in them just went like this, Rabotai, backwards. A lot of them, Rabotai, I know personally, don't keep nida laws, even though they know halachot of nida, because their husbands don't want, whatever that's supposed to mean. Don't keep, Rabotai, laws of modesty. At one point they used to wear skirts, now they're wearing tights. They, Rabotai, don't keep Shabbat, because the husband wants to go to the beach and places like that on Shabbat. So, Rabotai, it's a very big problem. Let's say this type of person, where they knew the halachot, they knew everything, and they went ahead and they cooked on Shabbat knowingly, intentionally. Nevertheless, says Rav David Yosef Shlita, Mi'ikar Hadin, according to the letter of the law, Mutarot HaKedera Belo Hagala. Still, Rabotai, the pot, you're going to be able to use it without Hagala. You don't have to do Hagala, Rabotai. Mi'ikar Hadin. Af le'oto shebishel ba, even to that person that cooked with that pot on Shabbat knowingly, intentionally. Umikol makom, and nevertheless, says Rav David Yosef, nachon lahachmir, since you have other opinions that will tell you shouldn't use that pot, so he says it is correct to be stringent. She'yagil et hakidera kodem shishtamesh ba. It is correct to be stringent that you should do hagala to that pot prior to using it for cooking food. So therefore, Rabotai, you see over here that if it was done by accident, we're going to tell lechatchila, ideally, initially, you don't have to do no hagala, nothing. The pot is good to be used, no problem at all. But if it was done intentionally, according to the letter of the law, we're going to tell you, you don't have to do hagala. Nevertheless, it is correct, and it is proper for one to be stringent to go ahead and do hagala with that pot, and only then continue using that pot for cooking food. However, if the parent or the mother did not do hagala, the children should not make a problem, because according to the letter of the law, it is allowed to be used, meaning you're allowed to use it in the future for continuing cooking food in that pot. However, Rabotai, says Rav David Yosef, V'imi kedera shel cheres. What happens if you have a pot which is made from earthenware, like clay? Nachon lahachmir shegalenu shlosh pamim. It is correct to be stringent, to do hagala 3 times, right? Put it into the hot water, run it under the cold water. Put it into the hot water, and then run it under cold water. Put it into the hot water, and then again, rinse the utensil or the pot underneath the cold water. It is good for one to be stringent if it's a kli cheres, if it's a earthenware utensil. Says Rav David Yosef, all these laws that we just spoke about, where we want you to be stringent and to do hagala, that's only specifically to the person that went ahead and he intentionally used that pot on Shabbat and cooking food in it. He has to be stringent. Aval, however, Rabotai la'acherim, but for other people, let's say the children, the husband, that did not use the pot for cooking on Shabbat, mutorot akidera achar Shabbat, that kidera becomes permissible for them to use after Shabbat, va'afilu lechatchila, and even ideally, Ve'ena tzricha hagala klal. It does not need any hagala at all. So we see over here, Rabotai, that a child or other people in the household should never have a problem, or don't make a problem just because, Rabotai, your parents desecrate Shabbat, showing them that you don't want to eat from their pot because they used it on Shabbat. Says Rav David, he says clearly, Aval la'acherim, however, when it comes to other people, mutarot ha'kedera achar Shabbat. The kedera is permissible after Shabbat. You're allowed to eat from that kedera. Va'afilu l'katchila, and even initially. Ve'ena tzricha hagala klal, and doesn't need hagala at all. Rabotai, I'm not saying that parents should desecrate Shabbat. But what I am saying is that children shouldn't make problems with their parents. They should try to bring their parents back to Hashem, not push them away from Hashem. So, Rabotai, this is a very important halakha. Now we're going to move on to the next halakha. We're going to speak about tavshil shenitbashal b'Shabbat. If you had a food which was cooked on Shabbat, but Rabotai, what happened? But now it got mixed into another food. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if somebody went ahead and he cooked on Shabbat knowingly, intentionally, and this food that he cooked on Shabbat got mixed in with another food, which is the majority, from the food which was cooked on Shabbat, mutar le'ochol et oto tavshil, you're allowed to eat that tavshil, afilu b'Shabbat atzma, even on Shabbat itself. Ben kishinit arev oto tavshil bimino, whether that cooked food got mixed in with the same kind, or ben kishinitarev bimin acher, or whether that cooked food got mixed in with something else that is not its own kind. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if a person, let's say, he went ahead and he cooked food on Shabbat, knowingly, intentionally. Now, Rabotai, he looks around, he turns around, he says, hey, where did the food go? Oh, they say, oh, we mixed it in with that food. Doesn't matter. It's same kind, not its same kind. Does not matter. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, you're allowed to go ahead and eat from that food on Shabbat without a problem. Continues Rav David Yosef and he says, Va'av la'acherim, and so too for other people, mutar le'chol et oto tavshil afilu b'Shabbat atzma. Again, if you can eat it, how much more so other people can eat it? So that's what he's telling us over here. Even for other people, it is permissible for them to eat that food, even on Shabbat itself. Ve'en shaykh lomar bazeh, and there's no reason to say over here, she'atavshil nechshav ledavar sheyesh lo matirin. There's no reason to say over here, Rabotai, that this cooked food is considered that something which is going to become permissible. So let me try to explain this concept right over here. So let's try to go ahead and first understand davar sheyesh lo matirin. What does that mean, Rabotai? Something that is forbidden but will become permitted later. Now, a classical example that the Chachamim of blessed memory use, they say that if you had an egg which was laid on Yom Tov, right? You had a chicken that laid an egg on Yom Tov. We're going to tell you that on that day itself, it's asur for you to eat it. Now the question is going to be like this, Rabotai. What happens if it got mixed up or mixed in with other eggs? Can you go ahead and say, listen, batal barov is nullified in the majority, or maybe I have 60 eggs over there against that one egg. Batal b'shishim, nullified in 60, or maybe nullified in 1,000. Can I say that? Rabotai, we're going to tell you no. Why? Whenever you have the rule of davar sheyesh lo matirin, something which is prohibited now, but can become permissible later, we're not going to tell you it becomes nullified. So therefore, with the case with the egg, since it can become permissible after Yom Tov comes out, that's what we're going to tell you, it cannot become nullified. Says Rav David Yosef Shitav here the same thing. ואין שייך לומר בזה, over here you don't have to say, שהתבשיל נחשב לו דבר שיש לו מתירין. That this food is considered for the person like something which can become permissible. Because why? Because wait until after Shabbat is going to come out, then the food is going to become permissible. No, we don't have to say this rule over here. Okay, Rabotai, so one more time, right over here, one more time. Ve'af la'acherim, and even for other people, mutar lechol et oto tavshil, afilu b'shabbat atzmam. You're allowed to go out and you're allowed to eat from that food where the cooked food that was cooked on Shabbat got mixed in with other foods. You're allowed to eat from that whole food on Shabbat. Ve'en shaykh lomar b'zeh, and there's no reason to say in this, שהתבשיל נחשב לדבר שיש לו מתירין. That the tavshil, that this cooked food that got mixed up with the prohibited food, that it can become permissible tomorrow after Shabbat is out. You don't have to say the Rabotai, and you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to eat it even on Shabbat. Vehu adin, and the same halach is going to apply in this, afilu even le'inin tavshil shenibashal b'Shabbat b'shogeg. Again, Rabotai, if we saw over here, that we said over here, Rabotai, that if it happened b'mezid right over here, Rabotai, Mishi b'shal b'Shabbat b'mezid, if somebody went ahead and he cooked on Shabbat intentionally, knowingly, and we said that you're allowed to eat it when it gets mixed up with other foods and there's a majority over there, we said you're allowed to eat it, so over here also, Rabotai, how much more so over here? When it was done by accident. All Rav David Yosef Shlita is telling us over here, he's just telling us Vuadin, that's it. And the same halach is going to apply in this case. Even in regards to a food which was cooked on Shabbat by accident, and afterwards, this prohibited food which was cooked on Shabbat got mixed up with another food, where that other food, the permitted food, is the majority, is more from the food which was cooked on Shabbat. Shemutar, Rabotai, same concept. Shemutar le'echol et ot tavshil. You're allowed to eat the tavshil. Afilu b'Shabbat atzma, even on Shabbat itself. Ben lemevashel atzmo, whether we're dealing with the person who cooked the food on Shabbat, he himself, or ben lacherem, or whether we're dealing with other people. We're going to tell them that they're allowed to go ahead and they're allowed to eat the food on Shabbat. Ve'ena tavshil nechshav, again, same concept, Rabotai. And this food is not considered, don't look at this food as ledavar sheyesh lo matirin, that's something that can become permissible, so maybe we should tell you it's asur for you to eat it now. Don't do that, Rabotai. You're allowed to even eat it on Shabbat. So Rabotai comes out of here like this, that let's say if I have a food where I went ahead and I cooked it on Shabbat. Now this prohibited food that I cooked on Shabbat got mixed up with permissible food, whether it's the same kind, whether it's not the same kind. But as long as this food is the majority, we're going to tell you we're allowed to eat this whole food and we don't have to wait until after Shabbat. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita, he says like this, Rabotai. Now, there is a concept also in halakha that when there's such a thing that's called batal b'shishim, something that can become nullified in 60, batal barov, it can become nullified in the majority. You don't have to have 60 times. It can be even one time more. For example, if you have 51% of the permissible food and 49% of the prohibited food, the food that was cooked on Shabbat, we're going to tell you allowed to eat it. As we're going to see right now, Rabotai, it doesn't have to have 60 times more. That you don't have to have. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, V'chol she'ez rov betavshil hamutar, as long as you have majority in the permissible food, keneged ma she'nibashal b'Shabbat, against that which was cooked on Shabbat. For example, let's say the permissible food, you had 51%. The prohibited food, you had 49%. Yesh lahakel lechol et oto tavshil afilu b'Shabbat. You're allowed to be lenient and eat that food even on Shabbat. Ve'en tzarich, and you don't need shiyeh shishim keneged tavshil shenitbashal b'Shabbat. You don't need to have 60 times of the permissible food against the prohibited food which was cooked on Shabbat. That, Rabotai, you don't have to have. When we say majority, it has to be literally majority. Va'afilu kishaya tav shilach shenitbashal b'Shabbat. Even though we're dealing with a liquid food which was cooked on Shabbat, v'nitarev b'tav shel acher sheulach, and it got mixed in with another food which is also liquidy. V'kol sheken kishenitarev yavash b'yavash. So that's what Rav David Yosef Shlotai is telling us over here. That, Rabotai, even if you were dealing with a liquid dish where it got mixed up with another liquid dish, where really, Rabotai, when we're dealing with liquids, in reality, you do need to have 60 times against the prohibited food. Nevertheless, we're going to tell you, even there, the rov is enough, majority is enough. 51 to 49, it's enough. And how much more so by Yavish, where we're even more lenient, because it doesn't spread as much like it does by the liquid. How much more so also by Yavish, we're going to, meaning by dry foods, we're going to tell you that majority is enough, and you don't have to be concerned, and you're allowed to eat that food on Shabbat. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlotai, he says, V'yesh omrim, however, Rabotai, now we're going to see today, there's such a thing that's called haticha haru'ya litchabed. If you have a piece where it's fit to honor a guest with it, like say a nice steak, over there, Rabotai, the halakha is different. Look what Rav David Yosef Shlotai says. V'yesh omrim, and there are those that say, she'im nit'arva chaticha, if this food that got mixed in with the permissible food, which was cooked on Shabbat. So let's read it one more time, Rabotai. V'yesh omrim, and there are those that say, she'im nit'arva chaticha shenitbashala b'Shabbat b'chatichot achirot, if you had this piece of meat, let's say, which was cooked on Shabbat and it got mixed up with other pieces of meat, ve'ota chaticha, but that piece of meat that you cooked on Shabbat was shenitbashla b'Shabbat, which was cooked on Shabbat, it was chaticha haru'ya litchabed. Chaticha literally means piece. Haru'ya means somebody that is proper litchabed, to honor. So he says, but he gives us the translation, Dahainu, which means to say, shehi chaticha gedula v'chashua. It's a big piece and it's an important piece. Shera'ui l'hagisha lefnei ha'orchim, that it is proper for you to serve it before guests. If we're dealing with such a piece of meat, over there, Rabotai, the halachot are different. And he says, ve'en ota chaticha nikaret. Now, you're not able to recognize the piece because they all look the same. You're not able to take it out because you don't know which one it is. Says Rav David Yosef Shlotai, ne'esru kol otan hatichot b'achila b'Shabbat. All of those pieces are going to be prohibited to be eaten on Shabbat. Why? Because we're dealing, Rabotai, with a haticha ha'uruya litchabed. We're dealing with a piece of meat where it's fit to be brought before guests. It's an important piece. So that's what Rabotai over there. We're not going to tell you that is batal berov. Ve'en ota chaticha betela afilu be'elef, Rabotai. And that piece of meat, which is an important piece of meat, is not going to become even nullified even in 1,000. Ula'achar ha-Shabbat, however it says in after ha-Shabbat, after the Shabbat, mutar le'ochlam, you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to eat all of those pieces of meat. V'hainu, and that means to say, kishenitbashla ota chaticha b'Shabbat b'shogeg. When are we going to allow you to eat all those pieces after Shabbat? That's if you cooked that important piece of meat on Shabbat by accident. Then we're going to tell you after Shabbat you're allowed to go ahead and eat everything. Aval, however, im nitbashla b'mezid. What happens if that chashuv piece, that important piece, you went ahead and you cooked it on Shabbat intentionally, knowingly? Ne'esru kol hachatichot le'mevashal atzmo le'olam. All the pieces that it got mixed in with right now, let's say you had over there 100 pieces of steak. Now you don't know which one is what. Rabotai, since you cooked it on Shabbat knowingly, intentionally, we're going to tell you everything becomes asur on the person who cooked it. He himself could no longer eat it forever. However, he says, mutarot, but to other people, it's going to be permissible to eat from that piece of tray or from those pieces of meat. Kulam b'motzei Shabbat. They're going to be able to eat everything after Shabbat comes out. Okay, Rabotai, now we're going to see a review. If Yom Tov falls out on Motzei Shabbat and someone cooked on Shabbat, may the food be eaten on Yom Tov? Answer, no. Whether the cooking was b'shogeg, meaning unintentional, or b'mezid, meaning intentional, the food may not be eaten on that Yom Tov because Shabbat cannot prepare for Yom Tov. Question number 2. If someone cooked on Shabbat for a dangerously ill person, choleh sheyesh bo sakana, may a healthy person eat that food on Yom Tov? There is a dispute. Some forbid it, while others permit it. The halakha is that one may rely on the lenient opinion. Right? We saw that since Yom Tov is after Shabbat, therefore, if you went ahead and you cooked that food which was in a permissible way, because it was done for a person whose life is in danger, we're going to tell you that even a healthy person is able to be lenient and eat it on Yom Tov after Shabbat. But that, Rabotai, is a lenient opinion. If you want to be stringent, you don't have to eat it. Halacha number 3. For the people that live outside of the Eretz Yisrael, outside of Eretz Yisrael, if Yom Tov is Sunday and Monday, and someone cooked on Shabbat for Yom Tov, when may the food be eaten? It may be eaten on the second day of Yom Tov, which is a Monday. Question number 4. If water was boiled on Shabbat and later cooled off, may it be drunk on Motzei Shabbat when it is Yom Tov? The answer is yes. Question number 5. If the water was not drinkable without boiling, may it be drunk on that Yom Tov? No, one should be stringent. Question number 6. If fruits that are normally edible raw were cooked on Shabbat and improved through cooking, like we spoke about the compote case, may they be eaten on Yom Tov after Shabbat? No, one should be stringent not to eat them. Question number 7. Regarding a kettle pot used on Shabbat. If a pot was used to cook on Shabbat by mistake, must it be kasher, right? Do you have to do the hagalah business, the boiling, the utensils in a boiling hot water? No, it may be used after Shabbat without hagalah. Question number 8. If the pot was used for intentional cooking, what should be done? Strictly speaking, according to the letter of the law, it does not require hagalah, but it is proper for the person who cooked intentionally to perform hagalah before using it. Question number 9. If the pot is earthenware, what is the proper practice? It is proper to perform 3 hagalot. Question number 10. Does this stringency apply to everyone? No. It applies only to the person who intentionally cooked. Others may use the pot immediately after Shabbat without hagalah. Question number 11. If food intentionally cooked on Shabbat becomes mixed into a large amount of permitted food, may it be eaten? Yes, even on Shabbat itself, if the permitted food is the majority. Question number 12. Does it matter whether the foods are the same type or different types? No, it is permitted in both cases. Question number 13. Is this considered a davar sheyesh lo matirin? No. Like we spoke about, do you have to wait for the following day? Because I can say it can become permissible tomorrow, so why eat it now? Do we have to say it over here? We don't have to say it. Question number 14. Does the same rule apply if the cooking on Shabbat was unintentional? Yes, the same rule applies. Question number 15. How much permitted food is required to permit the mixture? A simple majority is sufficient, meaning a rov. 60 shishim is not required. Question number 16. Does this apply only to dry foods? No, it applies even to liquids mixed with liquids, and certainly to dry foods mixed with dry foods. Question number 17. What is a chaticha haru'uya lidchabed? A large, important piece of food that is worthy of being served to guests. Question number 18. According to the stringent opinion, if such a piece cooked on Shabbat becomes mixed with other pieces and cannot be identified, what is the law? It is not batel, even in 1,000, and all the pieces are forbidden on Shabbat. If that important piece was cooked b'shogeg, when may the mixture be eaten? After Shabbat. If it was cooked b'mezid, what is the law? For the one who cooked it, all the pieces remain forbidden forever. For everyone else, they are permitted after Shabbat. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.